6:30. We're going to begin tonight, as we do each week, with the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to invite our guests to join the council and staff in the pledge, which tonight will be led by our Chief of Police, Mr. Dan Drummond. Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The council did meet in closed session this evening to confer with our legal counsel regarding one item of litigation, the City of West Sacramento versus the California Department of Finance and the County of Yolo. No action was taken. So now we'll proceed to our general administration agenda. Before we begin with item 1A, I do want to make a brief announcement for the public and an acknowledgement, and that is that our Chief of Police, who's been serving with distinction in the City of West Sacramento after 36 years in law enforcement and serving our community ably since August of 2004, Chief Drummond is retiring. And he informed the department and the men and women of the West Sacramento Police Department earlier today. And on behalf of the council and the whole community, want to congratulate him and also express our deep gratitude to Chief Drummond. In the press release that's going out right now, noted that our community is a much safer place because of the leadership of Chief Drummond and the men and women that have served under his leadership. That property crime in our communities dropped 30% since August of 2004 when he was appointed chief. Violent crime has dropped by 2/3 since he was appointed chief. This is a much better community. Chief Drummond has been a leader both in our community, active in a variety of community-wide, county-wide, region-wide initiatives and efforts through United Way, through the Police Chiefs of California, with our local Callings Teen Center, the Community Corrections Partnership Executive Committee. He is widely acknowledged as a leader in law enforcement. We've been very fortunate to have his leadership in our community and want to wish him the best and invite the city manager. I'd like to say a word as well.
Well, thank you, Mayor and council members. Chief Drummond's just been an extraordinary police chief, well respected throughout the community and the region. He's been a great pleasure to work with. He's also, in his retirement announcement, is willing to assist us with the transition, including the budget development for the department, with his plans of leaving in June, early July. And we really appreciate his service and more importantly, his character and the culture that he has provided to the department.
Chief, did you want to say a word? Or you don't have to, but I've been in these rooms where people are talking about me and I can't say anything. Okay, thank you very much, Chief. All right, we're going to proceed then to, let me just note also on our agenda that we're going to be moving item 8, which is currently scheduled for the consent agenda, and removing it from the consent agenda and taking it up under our regular calendar. All right, that brings us to item 1A, which is presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the City Council. As is noted on our agenda, we're prohibited by state law from taking up any items that are brought up under item 1A, but it is an important opportunity for a public hearing, for a public forum. We do ask that anyone wishing to address the council on this or any other item tonight to please fill out one of the yellow cards that's available near the front door and turn it into the city clerk. In front of the clerk is a timer that we use to make sure that everyone gets a chance to be heard, and to that end we ask that all comments be limited to no more than 3 minutes. Also in front of the clerk is a flip chart, and that simply indicates which agenda item we are currently considering. We recognize that for some folks speaking in public can cause some anxiety, so we do ask that there not be any boos or even applause or catcalls or other demonstrations, that we try to maintain a civil discourse in the chambers. We take the cards, the request to speak, all the way up to the conclusion of the staff report on any particular agenda item. Once the council questions and the public comment have begun, we don't take any additional cards, so if you have an interest in speaking on an item that's on the agenda later in the evening, the earlier the better for turning in the card, but no later than the conclusion of the staff report. So with that, we are going to proceed to item 1A, and I want to go directly and first to a very special guest that we have. I was actually going to ask Councilmember Johannesson to make a brief comment, because we're here tonight in large part because of Mr. Johannesson's leadership in connecting our community, and we're very pleased to have tonight with us the Consul General from Mexico, for an exciting partnership that we're intending to launch. And Mr. Johansson, would you like to say a couple of opening remarks?
Sure. Yeah, this is really an exciting visit by the Consul General of Mexico. West Sacramento will be hosting the Cuauhtemoc ship, which is a training vessel, Mexican training vessel that will visit the port either this year or next year. The details are still to work out. But I'm really excited about the ship being here and about the ramifications for development of friendship between not only the Consulate General and the city of West Sacramento, but the effect that will have on the region. And I'm looking forward to our participation and joint participation in that event.
Yeah, we're absolutely thrilled that Consul General Carlos Gonzalez Gutierrez is here this evening. This is it's a great honor for us and for the community. Our two places, both the community of West Sacramento and the country of Mexico, have a long intertwined past together. So many of the residents of our community either were born in or have ancestors and family who were born in Mexico and maintain close ties to family members and friends that are there. So the continuing relationships between our two communities have been long established. But Mexico is also one of the world's most strongly emerging economies in terms of the strength of the growth of the Mexican economy, the dynamism of what it has to offer, and promoting better information in our own community and in our region about the important opportunities for trade, for mutual economic benefit between the country of Mexico and our own community, and through our port, the entire region is, I know, a priority for the Consul General and for us as well. That I think many in this country would do well to get up to speed on what's really happening in the Mexican economy and the important role that it is beginning to play worldwide, and the potential connections for the private sector in both of our communities to prosper as a result. And so let me, without further ado, invite the Consul General to please come up to the podium and give us a few remarks. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be present at your council meeting today. I take the opportunity to thank Mayor Christopher Cabaldon for hosting us today, and City Council member Mark Johansson, who had the initiative of inviting us to this council meeting. Council member Villegas, Council member Christoph, thank you very much for the opportunity. And thank you also for the invitation for the Cuauhtemoc vessel and its crew to visit the port of West Sacramento, either this year or next year, as part of the vessel's international city tour. We have already sent that invitation to our embassy in Washington, D.C., and we would be able to provide you with an answer relatively soon. As you know, Cuauhtemoc has sailed around the world and received countless awards while visiting several countries. The most recent, Ireland, where the Cuauhtemoc participated in the Dublin Tall Ships Festival during August 2012. A potential visit of the ship to the port of West Sacramento would represent an honor for Mexico and would add to the vessel's history the fact of having visited a highly important, dynamic, and business-friendly city. I want to highlight that, besides the importance that the ship per se entails, I see this invitation as a great opportunity to reaffirm the economic, political, and social importance our countries have on each other. Let me tell you that according to the U.S. Census Bureau, the 24 counties covered by my consular jurisdiction total a population of approximately 4.5 million people, out from which almost 1 million are of Mexican origin, of Mexican descent, and almost 300,000 were born in Mexico. We are talking about people representing the strongest family links that unite Mexico with Northern California. The potential visit of the Cuauhtemoc will foster future political and economic opportunities that will bring prosperity to both Mexico and California. I want to recognize the City of Sacramento for taking this initiative. As you know, Mexico is California's #1 exports market and the buyer of $26 billion in California products. No other country, Mr. Mayor, is more important to California in terms of trade and creation of jobs. Having said this, I will keep you posted on the answer we receive, and I thank you again, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Council members, for giving my country the honor of visiting this council meeting and having and opening up the possibility of visiting your beautiful city through the vessel of the Cuauhtémoc. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's rare that we have Consul Generales come and visit us, but thank you very much for coming. Your presence is always welcome. I know you've been extremely engaged in the region and certainly in our city on many affairs, and so thank you for coming, and we look forward to seeing the Cuauhtémoc as well. Thank you.
Christoph.
Yeah, I too would echo my fellow council members' comments. This is really more than just the opportunity for our port to host a ship. This is an opportunity for friendship, for reaching out, for continuing to further the relationships that we do have, making them even stronger. And I, for one, really appreciate the fact that the mayor and council member Johannesson have taken the initiative to try to foster better relationships and try to foster closer relationships so that we get to know you. Because I think that as we get to know people better and better through whatever means necessary, we become a better nation and we become a better state. And of course, we become a better city. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to have the dialogue and have the discussion and shake some more hands.
All right. And you know, no other major city in this region has had more city council members of Mexican descent serve on its governing body. This is a community that has strong and deep ties. So we're looking forward both to the Cuauhtémoc and also to the continuing strengthening of the ties between our two communities. Thank you so much for being part of tonight. All right, next we're going to proceed to item, we have no other requests under item 1A, am I correct, Madam Clerk? I have too many papers. Here it is, sorry. Senator Maldonado? From the Yolo County Children's Alliance, welcome.
Hello, and good evening. My name is Sandra Maldonado. I work with Yolo County Children's Alliance, and I'm here to provide an update. We've currently moved from the Alice Norman Education Center to the Bright Elementary School at 637 Todd Hunter Avenue. We're providing services as Medi-Cal, Healthy Families, Kaiser, and the CalFresh food stamp program. And we're currently in the process of, with VITA, we have a kickoff this Friday and February 2nd at the Arthur F. Turner Library. And we just want to invite everybody to come out and volunteer and join us. So if you can get the word out, please, that we've moved and that we are going to have a kickoff for VITA. Okay?
Terrific. Can you tell folks at home a little bit about what VITA is or what is expected as part of it?
Well, VITA is a volunteer income tax assistance program. There's 6 of us in the office that are certified, and it's a free service to the community. Last year, our numbers doubled, and we provided, in our office alone, a refunded amount back to the community of $500,000. So we're hoping this year to keep up that good work and hopefully increase the numbers.
Great.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, then that brings us to item 1B, which is council communications. Are there reports or other communications this evening? Mr. Johannesson?
Just quickly, Mr. Mayor, the Community Choice Aggregation Committee met And just to give a brief status update, they decided to go ahead and examine who in the consulting world can do a feasibility study to determine really what the community choice aggregation is going to cost. So the next meeting, we should have a list of these potential consultants to do that. And of course, that's going to bring to the participants the potential spread between the different rates that might be payable under community choice aggregation and what that would mean in terms of the contribution of the different municipalities. So at this point, it's still wait and see, waiting for the feasibility study to happen.
Thank you, Mr. Johansson. Mr. Christoph.
Yeah, very briefly, I know we are going to hear, as part of our agenda, a very thorough and report from the Corps of Engineers. But at the same time, West Sac-SAFCA met last Thursday, and the major issue discussed in that meeting was authorizing General Manager Ken Rusich to execute options to purchase borrow materials. It's very expensive. One would be really surprised at the price of dirt, but at the same time, it's very, very expensive. And so that was our major item that we had on our agenda.
All right, Mr. Villegas.
So, yeah, just earlier this evening, the Port Commission met, and as part of our ongoing series of meetings that we've been having to develop the Port's business plan, last night there was a very successful community forum that I understand the Port Chairman attended, as well as many folks in the community and business folks. And this evening at the Port Commission, we authorized the request for a request for interest for maritime operators of our northern terminal. So we'll see how that shakes out.
All right, and I should know, Councilmember Ledesma is home representing the hundreds of West Sacramentans that have the flu, and so we wish him well, and we expect him back at the next meeting. And he could not bring himself to infect everyone else in the chambers tonight, so we appreciate that. I have a report back from last week. I was in Washington, D.C., so pursuant to the legal requirements, I'm going to do the disclosure, but also there are some significant issues that were brought up during that trip. I was there for the U.S. Conference of Mayors winter meeting and for the inauguration, but we also met with various federal agencies and members and committees of Congress about our federal agenda. I was there and as well as the city manager and Mr. Lucan from our staff, covering a variety of these sessions. So a lot of topics. Obviously, our key priority has been on the flood protection side, and did meet with the Corps about that issue and about staying on track with the general reevaluation report, which we'll hear more about later this evening. And those issues, it was a productive meeting with the Corps. Also discussed were the channel deepening project and how to move forward with channel deepening and with our dredge material management plan to manage the silting up of the channel at its current geometry. I met with, we had two separate meetings with Doris, Congresswoman Matsui and her senior staff on those issues, as well as the streetcar project and the crediting issue with respect to our flood protection investments. And she has been dogged as an advocate on these issues. She has, as a matter of practice, weekly or biweekly calls with the Corps district office, as well as with FTA in Washington, D.C., to make sure that that there's appropriate attention being placed on meeting the schedules on all those projects, and our key pieces are now going to be part of those regular calls, and so they've been really helpful advocates for us as well. Mr. Lucan and the city manager met with MARAD, the Maritime Administration, around issues at the port, particularly on the Marine Highway and the barging opportunities that we're looking to secure. We met with the Democratic staff of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and the the committee staff for the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, which is chaired by Senator Boxer. with a primary interest in WRDA, the Water Resources Development Act, which has implications for both the flood issues and the port issues. And I think one positive outcome of those conversations was appears to be a high degree of confidence that a WRDA bill is going to at least move through the Senate and possibly through the House as well. There's strong support by both the Republican and Democratic leadership of the committee and the Senate, and apparently pretty significant support on the House side as well for moving it quickly. That's positive. And to move it, including language that would solve the credit issue on the flood investment side. So that's, if we're able to achieve that, that's a major step forward. That's partly enabled by the fact that the committee's chair is Barbara Boxer, she and Senator Feinstein have been outstanding on this issue, along with Congressman Thompson and Congresswoman Matsui, to advance this. So it's been very clear that this is a priority for California. But the ranking Republican member, the new one, is Senator Vitter from Louisiana, and they're having the same issues with respect to levies and crediting issues there, and so it's been a non-issue in terms of the partisan divide in Washington, D.C. So that was very positive. We did convey the importance of moving the Southport project along as quickly as possible, and that one key issue there, in addition to the processing of it with the Corps, is our ability to assure the state of California that the crediting will be eligible for crediting, and so that those issues go hand in hand. And we actually didn't need to brief much on that because there's such it's quite remarkable how much knowledge there is in Washington, D.C. about the West Sacramento flood project and some of these critical issues. And so if we can get a WRDA solution, that would be very positive. It is also the case that the Assistant Secretary of the Corps who revoked the credit eligibility will be appearing before both Senator Feinstein and Senator Boxer's committees in the coming months. And so we expect that there'll also be questions appropriately placed before her as to the implications and consequences and why it makes sense for the federal government not to encourage local communities and states to make investments now in flood protection improvements rather than have money sit in the bank and wait for a federal appropriation. So those were all very, very positive. We met with the White House about this same topic. They remain advocates for us. OMB, which is traditionally problematic on issues like this, solidly on our side on the credit issue in particular. And so the White House, the mayor of Des Moines, Iowa, and I have been pushing on this issue with the White House. Iowa mayors tend to have more influence with folks who run in presidential primaries. So we've been going together. But the White House's sense, and I think this is shared by most of the other players in the Capitol, is that we both have strong cases, but ours is better, so that we should lead with the West Sac project on the credit eligibility piece, with the Des Moines and the Louisiana and some other communities cheering us on, but that we have the strongest set of facts essentially to move forward, so that we ought to proceed pretty expeditiously in terms of submitting some initial credit determinations for the Southport project. So the White House meeting was very positive in that domain. I also briefed the White House folks on our streetcar project, but we don't have a specific ask at this point. Just trying to tee them up for once we've submitted it to the FTA. Met with Congressman John Garamendi at his request. He is on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and he was just this week being appointed to the Water Resources Subcommittee of that committee, and so he will be very involved in the writing of WRDA on the House side, as much as a member of the Democratic minority can be. So that will also be helpful. He's, although we're not in his district, he represents the whole stretch of the Sacramento River. We're this little carve-out, and he comes through our district, through our city, to get to the rest of his district from Walnut Grove. He's very sympathetic and understands the issues that we have on both the port and on the flood projects, and is definitely committed to being an advocate in the subcommittee on that process as well. Met with the Secretary of Education, who I think I said a couple months ago that they had done these district-level Race to the Top grants. They're going to be doing another round of them, and he strongly encouraged our community, our district, to apply. So I'm going to, the next 2x2 meeting or the other appropriate venue, convey convey that to the district. Those applications are stronger when they have the partnership of other local civic partners, including cities. But that, as you know, I think Galt won $15 million or something on that order as one of the few California districts that was successful in the first round. But as a second-round applicant, he said he thought we could put together a winning application. And then finally met with the administrator of the Federal Transit Administration, Peter Rogoff, who was here. Mr. Ledesma was with me 2 weeks ago at SACOG when Administrator Rogoff was here with Secretary LaHood, and it was clear at that session that the administrator was supportive in concept of our streetcar project, but had some specific questions and concerns, and so this was an opportunity to meet with him in detail about those issues and to hear, very specifically, okay, what's bothering you, what's on your mind, what do we have to fix, under what time frame in order to be successful. It was a very productive meeting in that sense. We got very detailed feedback from him about and his team, the leadership team at FTA, around what's going to be necessary for us to be successful with our small starts application for the streetcar project, and with a continued agreement that we should proceed right away, that we should be submitting during this cycle for small starts. So all in all, very positive set of advocacy meetings. So, yeah. Okay. If there are no other communications, then item 1C is council appointments, and this is the evening in the 2-year cycle under which make appointments to the city's various boards and commissions. We had an extraordinary number of West Sacramento citizens volunteer and apply to serve on the city's various boards and commissions. Quite a few applicants, and I took the opportunity to interview, I think in total, by the time we were done, nearly 50 of the applicants one-on-one. And at once, it was both frustrating because there's so many people that want to serve and there's only so many slots on these commissions, but really quite invigorating because there's a huge, diverse number of citizens in our community who want to step up, who are excited about what's happening, want to do good in the city, want to help, want to volunteer their time and their expertise. And so, although the actual appointments can only be to the number of seats that are here, I think and I know the council has also seen all the applications, and it was very encouraging to see the level of community engagement and civic volunteerism by folks in this pool. And partly because of that, I've made a special effort in this round of appointments to appoint more new commissioners. We've traditionally reappointed virtually all the commissioners unless they die or move. And as the city has grown and the population of the community has gotten bigger and more diverse, I've tried to, in this round in particular, I think appoint for every one of the commissions, save one, to appoint at least 2 new commissioners, and in some cases 3 or 4, to try to bring some new voices to the table while also taking advantage of the long-term expertise and continuity that is necessary for our commissions to be fully engaged. Right? Having all new commissioners doesn't work either if everyone has to learn all the issues and the language over and over again, so try to achieve that balance. And so I would make the following appointments and at the conclusion ask for the council for a motion to confirm them. First, to the Commission on Aging, reappointment of Elena Birch-Santos and Dante Early and Jacqueline Noble are the 3 proposed reappointments, and then James Joseph and Susan Tarleton as the new appointments. For the Agricultural and Natural Resources Commission, reappointments of John Kennedy, and it's Faiz, not Fair on this paper, but Faiz Pourhosseini, and then new appointments of Colleen Heiner, Annie King, and Jeff Stoddard. For the Arts, Culture, and Historic Preservation Commission, reappointments of Gail Clower, John Kloss, and Denise Seals, and new appointments of Shelley Hayes and John Skoglund. For the Board of Appeals, reappointment of Diane Gould and Brayon Davis, and new appointments of Chris Carlino, Ryan Raftery, and Richard Reed. For the Economic Development Advisory Commission, reappointments of Michael Brady, Patrick Henning, Vincent Wetzel, Yan Zhu, and James McNerney, and then new appointments of Kyle Glanker and Andrew Sternfels. For the Housing Commission, the reappointment of Min Lee, Aaron Sands, Marty Swingle, A.J. Tendick, and Thomas Vu, and new appointments of Alex Kelter and Lori Lackey. For the Parks Commission, reappointments of Bernadette Austin, Daniel Clayton, and Karina Orozco and Greg Price. New appointments of Matthew Hargrove, Don Peterson, with one appointment pending. We'll make in the next month. For the Planning Commission, reappointments of Russ Liebig, Charles Moore, Jeremy Olson, Beverly Sandine, and Joe Galvan, not Joe Gaydon. Sorry, that's a typographical error. And a new appointment of Martha Flammer. There's something missing off this page. Oh, I'm sorry, and Jennifer Perez is a reappointment. And then for the Sacramento, Yolo, Mosquito, and Vector Control District, a reappointment of Raul Deanda, and to the City Disaster Council, a new appointment of Peggy Bell. All right, so it's this sheet with the addition of Jennifer Perez at Planning and the correction of Joe Gaydon to Joe Galvan at Planning as well.
That would be interesting.
I don't think he would accept it. I don't think
I don't know.
think
Former
he'd do it.
city manager as a planning commissioner?
Yeah.
I would move the appointments.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. So those appointments take effect immediately, and I know the city clerk's going to be notifying those who are not present. So I'd like to, on behalf of the council, congratulate the new commissioners and thank them for their willingness to serve. But I also really, if there are any of the other scores and scores of applicants who did volunteer and step forward to serve on one of these commissions, first say thank you for doing so. We had a tremendous bench of both talent and enthusiasm among our citizens in this round. And we're not adding new commissions, but also to encourage to reapply again as vacancies come up. We keep these applications on file for the full 2-year cycle. So if commission seats become vacant for any reason, we do go back to those applications in addition to soliciting new ones as vacancies emerge. And then, as always, there's dozens and dozens of other volunteer opportunities in the community that if you still have every Thursday evening at 6 o'clock open that here at City Hall, we're happy to help connect folks to other ways to contribute to the community. But congratulations to the appointees and thanks to all of the applicants and the council members for their participation in the process. All right, that brings us then to the consent agenda, which is items 2 through 9 minus item 8. Are there any items on consent any member with the council wishes to remove, or any item for separate question or comment?
Question, comment, 5 and 7.
All right, item 5 is consideration of authorization to participate in the Sacramento Regional Bike Share Project Study. Mr. Villegas.
Just a quick comment. That's fine, Mike. I just wanted to just bring it to the council's attention. So I know that we've kicked around the idea sort of informally about the whole bike share program. There's been a lot of municipalities that have tried this but have failed. And I think the thing that I was looking for as we adopted a similar participation on behalf of the Yolo County Transportation District was to make sure that we were exploring or looking at those municipalities that had tried it and why it wasn't successful, because there's been a lot of sort of false starts with this program. It's not as easy as it might seem. And so I was looking for that, and that was absolutely a key component of what the plan is to roll out, because I know in Washington, D.C., I know for an example, that's one that we've used as part of our cap-to-cap trip on a regular basis, and they didn't, it works great now, but it didn't start that way, and so I was hoping that we could make sure that as part of our exploration that we would find a way to make sure that the lessons learned are front and center. So that was it.
Yeah, just to pile on, I totally agree. I also think one of the challenges with the bike share projects really globally has been in places that have tried to design them like another government program, as opposed to design something that is viable in the private sector, right? So it's driven by actual numbers, where customers are, what they're willing to pay, what they're willing to do. The private companies that run most of these, that operate most of these in the rest of the world now. And so being attentive to that dimension of it, that what you're really trying to do is how do you set the conditions right for a successful, no gigantic public subsidy operation of one of these systems? Because the ones that work are working quite well. And I'm definitely supportive of it. So I think keeping that in mind, that we're not, as we develop a 27-member executive committee and all these agencies, that we don't over-government it. So one request I would have, because this is a staff level sort of technical committee that's working on this, is that we get regular check-ins about how this is going. Obviously, a core interest for us is going to be, as we get to the point where we're ready to deploy a regional system, where are the stations? What do we need to do to help make sure that we have the appropriate ones in our city, that we're working on delivering the rights of way for them to get built and all of that? Because we certainly don't want to have a regional bike share system that doesn't cover at least a portion of our community from the outset, and that will require that doesn't just happen. That's both a question of where the demand centers, jobs and people and restaurants and theaters and everything, and baseball stadiums. But it's also a question of who's prepared to put up, provide the free right of way in the sidewalk or at the park for the station to occur. And so, I want to make sure I want to just be up to date on what's going on, so that we can be appropriately supportive from a policy and fiscal perspective where it's necessary in order for this to work.
I guess for me, the message that I would have for staff, and one of the core issues that I will look at is we need to make sure that it is financially feasible. I think that the finances of this are going to be very important. If it has worked well in other communities or other areas, those kinds of things should be looked at and find out what's the best policies that they've put in place to make it all work. But at the same time, I think that the limited budgets that, especially a city our size, we're small, and the limited budgets that we have and limited resources, we need to make sure that we prioritize those and make sure that whatever monies we do have go for the best system.
All right, item 7 is consideration of award of contract to Alves Security for the City of West Sacramento Facility Security Services. Mr. Villegas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to follow up. So as we, as the I say the urbanization, but yeah, the urbanization, I guess, or sort of the rebirth of our downtown on West Capitol Avenue with Civic Center and City Hall and the library and all the other services and amenities and all the people that we now have. This is very important as we kind of proceed down this path to make sure that we have adequate security. Not to overstate it, but it is important. And I know as part of our library, we want to make sure that we're protecting that investment as well. And so I know that we've had conversations with the community college and with the county library folks to make sure that everybody sort of has a little bit of skin in the game. So as we go down this path, I would just encourage staff to continue to dialogue with the other parties to make sure that everybody is kicking. And I know everybody wants to. I think there's been some very, very good meetings. So I echo, I think, in large part what staff is already saying, but I just want to keep it on the radar. But I support the staff's recommendation on this contract. I just want to shed a little light on that issue.
All right. Then if there's nothing further, is there a motion on the consent agenda minus number 8? Moved by Mr. Johannesson, seconded by Mr. Christoph. So no further discussion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Item 8 is consideration of lease agreement with Dell Financial Services for information technology servers and infrastructure. Ms. Richardson.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. This item is coming back to you for a second time. Previously, the council asked for more information on the financing aspect of the lease purchase agreement that's before you. Basically, what we're asking the council to do is to approve a 5-year lease purchase agreement, which would allow us to acquire a new storage area network. This is the backup system for all of the city's computer data, to implement a new remote disaster recovery system, and to acquire some more servers so that we can optimize our virtualization system. A more complete description of the 3 items is in attachment 1 here. At the last meeting, again, the council wanted some more information on the comparison between an outright purchase versus a lease purchase agreement. There is a attachment 2, which is on the back of attachment 1, has a comparison of the cash purchase versus the lease purchase using a discount rate of 1.62%. The undiscounted cost to the city over the 5-year period would be $28,000 more doing it through the lease purchase, and the discounted rate would be $9,800 more over the period of time. We're recommending that we proceed with this for a few reasons. One, the current sand that we have is no longer going to be supported by the vendor as of next month. And ironically, we're starting to have some operational issues with it. And this is a vital piece of a part of our IT infrastructure. The lease, every year we in the equipment fund, we set aside a certain amount of money for incremental replacement of equipment. The amount of money that the lease is going to cost is not that much more than what we had been traditionally budgeting every year. So by entering into this lease purchase agreement, we avoid a substantial capital outlay of funds and then still continue with the historical amount that we have budgeted for the lease purchase. So I'd be happy to answer any more questions for you. Our IT manager, Rob Miller, is here. If you have super technical questions on the equipment himself, he can answer those better than I can. And I'm available to answer more questions for you, too. Thank you.
Mr. Johannesson.
Yeah, Carol, this the majority of this cost is for the storage facility, right?
That's correct.
And this is just really a question, is the state of cloud storage such that cities are doing that as opposed to hosting their own storage?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Mr. Miller to respond to that question.
Mayor Cabal and Council. Mr. Johansson, cloud storage, we looked into that as an option, but the part that the SAN would be using would be like infrastructure as a service, and I don't feel that that cloud storage service is actually up to par yet. I would say at the next time that we visit this in 5 to 7 years, we should really look heavily at it, but at the current moment, there's really only 2 major vendors, Microsoft and Amazon, that are kind of in that arena, and I just don't feel it's mature enough yet to venture that way. It's putting all of our storage on that in the cloud.
Okay, that's fair. Thanks.
So the table, the comparison table between lease purchase and cash purchase with the present value is really helpful, and I'm glad. Thanks for doing it. We didn't get the one that compares on to just straight up leasing, which I imagine would be worse. The dollars, is that right?
Yes, it would be. It's a more expensive option. The other table in the report just mentions that verbally, that it's more to do that.
And it's more during this period, because I mean, to get to this other issue of, I mean, to do a lease purchase, and at the end of that 5 years, in the end of 2 years, it may be that these the kinds of alternatives that were just raised by Mr. Johannesson's questions are more mature. I mean, we can't really predict the speed at which that technology is really the technology and the market for it is evolving.
That's correct.
And so, I mean, which sort of raises the question: is why would we want to enter an agreement where at the end of it we would now own all of this equipment precisely at the moment where that it may be not obsolete, but not necessarily competitive with some of these other alternatives.
We chose not to go the lease route because the lease route would be great if we felt, you're right, if the lifetime of the product was going to be put over the lease. So if the equipment would last for 3 years and we did a lease for 3 years, we would return it and maybe change our whole focus. As an IT manager, I don't really like to shift technology that quickly because I think we stabilize out pretty well and we standardize on Dell. I do believe that over the next 5 years that whole market's going to shift, and while you're correct in the fact that I think we could lease it for a shorter amount of years and maybe look at changing our technology focus, I believe the 5-year model is, from my perspective, pretty solid because at the end of 5 years technology is going to change 100% anyway, and I'm rambling, which I apologize for. At the end of the 5 years, the technology is going to change anyway, and at that point, I believe that's when we should look at entering into either the cloud service or something there, but I just don't feel that in the next 5 years, the technology that we're currently using would be obsolete and we'd have to reapproach this anyway because the equipment itself is really only good for a 5 to 7 year lifetime. So even if we entered into it now, in 5 years from now, we'd still have to look at replacing it with a different infrastructure.
So, but that raises the question of why a lease purchase is better than a lease if at the end of the 5-year period the equipment's either not good or there are better alternatives. If there's a strong chance that we would be looking towards replacing it anyway, a structure that essentially has us paying now to own it at the end of the 5 years seems like it might not be the most optimal.
We could look into a true lease versus a lease purchase. I do not believe currently, from what I understand from Dell, that would really change our costs. We could look at a true lease. So at the end of the 5 years, we could, or whatever time frame we're looking at, we could return the equipment and maybe look at different options or refinance and continue to keep that equipment for an extended period of time.
So you think a straight lease, the actual lease cost would be?
I would have to believe a true lease cost would be very similar. The only benefit is, and the only negative or benefit is that we want to own the equipment or have the dollar buyout. We just return the equipment and then go back into looking for new equipment.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, we've had instances previously where we've had lease purchases and then a new piece of equipment comes on the market and we actually can go back and renegotiate the lease into something different. That usually the vendors are fairly responsive, not necessarily recently with IT, but previously we've done that.
All right, thank you. And any other questions or discussion on item 8? Is there a motion?
I'll move the item. Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Christoph and seconded by Mr. Villegas. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. That motion carries. That brings us then to our regular agenda, item 10, which is presentation of potential refinancing of the Community Facility District 20, Bridgeway Lakes 2, special tax bonds. Mr. Blumberg.
Yeah, the item we have before you tonight is another potential refinancing, and it's an information item just to let you know some of the details. The report's in front of you, so I'll just hit the highlights. Again, we're talking about refinancing about $9.6 million in bonds that are outstanding that were issued for the CFD 20 or the Bridgeway Lakes 2 subdivision back in 2005. Now, we believe that we're going to realize a little over $500,000 in savings from this refinancing, and the schedule's pretty quick. We would hope to be back to you February 20th for your authorization to refund the bonds, and then we would close in mid-March. A couple of issues that I just wanted to point out to you is really related to how we would use the savings, and we wanted to raise that issue now. You don't need to make a decision tonight, but any feedback you want to give us would be appreciated. The savings could be used for some capital improvements within the subdivision. Just point out we do have the park and then Bridgeway Lake there, and there are a number of CIP items, things that need to be replaced, like pumps for the lake, which, you know, if we don't have any other source of funds, would have to be funded through the city's general fund. So while this is savings for the CFD, it could also be something that equates to general fund money saved if we don't have to use those funds to replace equipment. And of course, the other option would be where we reduce the property owner's assessments. And what we've estimated is that the savings could result in about $77 per year on average for the homeowners there. With that said, really no action necessary tonight. We wanted to let you know that we're looking at another opportunity. We hope to be back to you February 20th.
And you shortcut because we've done a million of these, but just to reemphasize that when we're doing these refinancings, we're simply taking advantage of the reduced interest rate environment from when we've previously issued bonds for a variety of purposes. And we're not extending the terms on any of these. We're not stretching out. We're not borrowing against future generations in order to do this. We're simply trying to achieve savings that's easily achieved easily by our team in terms of these issues. For me personally, I think at least a portion. I mean, when we say if we don't fund them from this source, they're general fund, but that we don't have the general fund to do it. And so, to some extent, they are necessary improvements in the subdivision that will occur at some point. But if fixing the pump in the lake 15 years from now has its consequences in the subdivision too. So I don't object conceptually. I think it makes sense conceptually, actually, for some of the savings to be used in the subdivision for the same kind of improvements or to fix the improvements from that were originally funded. At the same time, I do think, you know, at least half, a majority of the savings should be passed along to the property owner, to the homeowners in the subdivision, that we should, that they certainly ought to be sharing significantly in the savings that's out there for the same reason, because there's, just as we're struggling to maintain the facilities that serve them, they are struggling for the variety of the issues in the economy as well. So, you know, if we said, you know, even if we said something like, of this, you know, $50 of the savings is going to go back to the homeowner, and $25 will go to the maintenance and the improvements in their subdivision. That sort of, and I'm not saying that's that number specifically, but, you know, that sort of balance, to me, makes some sense around what's fair and what's appropriate given the needs of the neighborhood and the individual homeowners there. Mr. Christoph?
Well, yeah, I would concur. I mean, I think that it really shows a leap of faith, if you will, and it shows good financial stewardship by you and your team and the city, because here we have an opportunity to save some money through refinancing, and if some of that money goes back to the property owner, they're going to feel a little bit better about it. They're going to feel that hey, you know, the city's really sort of looking after us a little bit. Now, certainly they'll have some questions. Your phone will ring because they'll think something's gone on, because this normally doesn't happen. But at the same time, I think that, you know, if you're really well prepared for that and you just tell them, no, we refinanced a bond. Your Mello-Roos bond was at a 6% rate or whatever it is. It's 2% or 3%, whatever that is. I think that really sends a good signal to our constituents that we're looking out after them. And I do think that some of that money should be put aside for fixing and repairing things that are going to go wrong. So I think that there's a balance there, though, and I like the idea. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I think like sending the whole thing back doesn't make sense. I mean, 'cause I don't want to be the state government that's like, hey, here's a tax refund. Oh, and now we're bankrupt, and now now we need a tax increase to pay for the stuff that we just sent you the money back for. We should be prudent. And so if it is $77, which is just your estimate, but I mean, I think, you know, paying attention to that balance makes a lot of sense. Other comments?
Yep, no, makes sense.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. Great work. All right. Item 11, highlight of the evening, is an update on the West Sacramento Levee Improvement Program and presentation by the United States Army Corps of Engineers.
She's been here before,
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, I'm here to open up this presentation, give you an update about the progress that we're making, the West Lip is making throughout the city. I was given this presentation this morning, as Greg Fabian also is ill with the flu. I have our team of super experts in the background here if you have any questions about the presentation, and then I'll be introducing the Army Corps. So I'm going to cover just briefly cover a few things about what's been happening, what we've completed, where we are today in terms of our Southport project, and some other issues that are critical to the flood protection program. So first and foremost, let me just say this slide presents a couple of different things, a couple of different projects that we've already completed. So the I Street project, as well as the was completed in 2008. CHP and the rivers were both completed in 2011. And then slip repairs were completed by the Army Corps of Engineers with the cooperation of DWR and West SAFCA. And as you know, the Army Corps has been the lead agency taking care of the Sac Bank project outside of the port, north of the Southport project that we're presently working diligently to bring forward. So where we are today is, a year ago, you received a presentation on 15% alternatives. Those were produced and evaluated about what was technically feasible, what are viable alternatives to try to achieve the entire 5.6-mile reach. These are alternatives in terms of how they were designed, varied in setback length, which is a requirement of the DWR early implementation project guidelines. Today, where we stand is 65% drawings were released and provided to the Army Corps of Engineers. They will be presented to the West Africa Board at the February meeting. Between then and now, between last year and now, we've completed 2 value engineering studies for segments B and F. These value engineering studies were done principally to try to look at different setback levies to try to minimize the loss of property, especially to residential properties. And ultimately, the board approved the staff recommendation following these value engineering studies. Moving on to the environmental document, the EIR-EIS is going through its 3rd administrative draft, and we anticipate that that will be released before the end of the month. And a public draft will be released sometime in the next couple of months. In terms of project funding, MBK has submitted, as you may know already, DWR accepted a modified and designed funding agreement that increased funding by over 3 times. Lastly, in terms of public outreach has been regular and continuous throughout the last year. We've had meetings about the design at both downstairs and at the community center. We've had focus meetings with property owners, especially those with residential or homes that are pretty close to the river, and they will continue to go on. In fact, a week from today, we will have another meeting for property owners regarding the real estate acquisition and relocation process that will be held at the Southport Boathouse. So looking forward, looking at future milestones, certainly the first one is we've completed the 65% drawings in terms of design. Over the course of, between now and, well, sometime over the course of the next year, probably sometime later this summer, we'll see 90% levee design as well as the offset area design. We anticipate the final EIR being presented to the West Africa Board later this summer. That's a critical milestone for us because it allows a lot of other things to happen once the project is deemed a project by the board. In addition to that, we'll be looking for an amended construction funding agreement with DWR to see the entire Southport project built. So we're hoping to use our existing agreement and have that modified so that that gets incorporated into that funding agreement. We will continue to do public outreach, not only for the EIR-EIS, but also to let property owners know what they can expect and what some of the different processes are moving forward. And, you know, we're very involved in a number of coordination meetings with other agencies. In terms of FEMA remapping, we continue to be not mapped. So we're still moving forward. We're still, you know, active in Washington to try to make sure that West Sacramento is considering what's going on and that the improvements that we're putting in place are not going to result in being mapped into a designation that would stall development. Furthermore, FEMA had started a new remap, or went through a new modeling effort. It took public comment, and to our knowledge, to the best of our knowledge, they have not recommenced remapping since that public comment period. As you know, there's also a regional flood management plan. The Central Valley Flood Protection Board, through the Department of Water Resources, is trying to look for regional flood program solutions. So they've established a number of working groups. West Africa is joined by Sacramento, and there's a number of groups that have come together. We've submitted DWR put up $10 million in funding for this particular process to allow regional entities to work together, try to come up with regional solutions that probably wouldn't be thought of by the local maintaining agencies in and of themselves. So the idea is to have a broader geographic base to come up with regional solutions that DWR may be able to support in the future. West Africa has received the support of Yolo County and Sacramento to be the grant administrator for our particular regional planning project. We have submitted a proposal to DWR, and work will commence once we receive a letter of commitment. A meeting I attended this morning indicates that that letter should be forthcoming within the next 10 days. This process is probably going to go on for the better part of the next year, maybe extending out to 18 months. But the idea is to have regional solutions that broad areas can agree upon and provide some input to DWR about how they might be accomplished, including funding. The last thing I want to touch on before I introduce Alicia Kirshner is a little bit about flood program transition changes. I spoke with Human Resources today, and between 40 and 50 applicants have applied for the flood protection manager job. That doesn't mean that we have that many qualified applicants. They still have to be gone through, but just to give you an update about the level of interest for that job. As you already know, Greg Faven was appointed to the Public Works Manager, and all of the team have been picking up and trying to fill in where we can. So Mark Zola continues to support the team, through working with MBK for reimbursement and keeping the board up to date on their current level of finances. John Powderly is assisting with the coordination of the EIS, as well as our interface with the federal government. Kendrick Jameson taking the lead on construction management. Toby Wong is providing engineering assistance, as well as working on utility relocation. And Derek Larson, who is here from MBK, has been providing overall stronger, greater public greater assistance to the team in terms of managing our business processes and keeping it moving forward. And Greg, I believe, is and sometime in February we'll be coming forward with a proposal to make sure that flood protection is its own division within the Public Works program. That concludes my portion of the presentation. I'd like to introduce Alicia Kirshner. I think you've heard her before. She's here to do a presentation that was presented to the board. She's also accompanied by two of her staff, which I'll let her introduce. And then at the conclusion of that, if you have any questions, the team is here to respond. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Alicia Kirchner. I am with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in Sacramento. I specifically am chief of our planning division. Our planning organization has responsibility for investigating flood risk reduction issues and developing decision documents that we put before Congress, making recommendations for projects to be invested in partnership with federal government, state and local governments. So tonight I'm here to present an overview of the status of what we call the General Reevaluation Report, which for all intents and purposes is a feasibility study. And I will go ahead and touch upon quickly the status of some of our other collaborative efforts that are part of your flood protection program. I'm going to focus on the General Reevaluation Report and some key items of interest associated with that. One will be the significance of a milestone that we hit last year in 2012. We referred to that as a feasibility scoping meeting. I'll talk about that, as well as address the schedule to complete the General Reevaluation Report. And I'm also going to talk about an initiative that the Corps of Engineers is undertaking agency-wide. We refer to it as Planning Modernization, and it has a nickname 3x3x3, which I will explain. And then I'll also touch on the status of our credit, your credit packages that have been under consideration, will be under consideration as part of your EIP program, and how those relate ultimately to the general reevaluation report. So, the overview of our collaborative efforts. With regards to your early implementation program, our role as you're developing and implementing those projects is twofold, at least from my perspective. One, you're working with the Corps to develop a documentation that gains permission to modify an existing federal project. We call it the 408 program. So you're showing that it is safe to modify an existing federal project. You show the improvements, and the Corps conducts a review to grant that approval. As part of that, my office gets involved with working with your folks to develop an EIR, Environmental Impact Statement, Environmental Impact Report, that goes along with that action, because the Corps of Engineers granting permission to modify a federal project constitutes a federal action, and that has a NEPA, that triggers a NEPA process for us. So we've been involved with that process. Your I Street Bridge and your CHP and river sites are completed. We are working with you on your development of your EIP for your Southport site. And our schedules for the GRR and your EIP are aligned, and we'll continue to coordinate to make sure that they remain aligned. We have completed construction on the slip repairs from the previously constructed federal project, and those repairs have been completed. Those sites have been turned over. And our Sac Bank Protection Project site at River Mile 57.2 is fundamentally complete. It's functionally complete. The flood protection features are in place. We're conducting reviews to make sure that things were done in accordance to Corps standards and criteria. And with that, I'll go ahead and roll into the update on the general reevaluation report. So I'll quickly mention, this is sort of a recap of our activities last calendar year, 2012. We started the year off this time last year working towards a traditional Corps of Engineers planning process milestone referred to as the feasibility scoping meeting. And that is we consider that to be an early crucial milestone of vertical engagement within the Corps. When I say vertical engagement, I mean our district office working on developing the actual report. We have two levels of higher Corps authority, a regional headquarters called South Pacific Division in San Francisco, and they have responsibility to make sure that we have sound quality control practices in place throughout the development of our projects. We also work vertically with our headquarters in Washington, D.C., who ultimately are gearing up to make sound recommendations to the Office of Management and Budget and the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works. They help work with us throughout the project development process to ensure that the types of things we're recommending at the district level ultimately be referred to Congress for action, that they can be developed to be consistent with the programs and policies of the administration. And the OMB and the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works are a part of making sure that we have solid decision making when we make our recommendations to Congress. So that feasibility scoping meeting is an early step that's crucial because it helps define the problems, the without project condition, what the future would look like if there was no additional federal involvement in the area. And it also gives us an indication as to whether or not we've identified a good array of solutions, alternative solutions. We hit that milestone last March, which was 1 month after the Corps came out with a pretty significant revision to how we go about conducting our planning program, so conducting these feasibility type studies. So we kept our eye on the ball and marched forward to hit that milestone last March, and then we sat back and looked at the new guidance and what it told us and what it didn't tell us, and we went about applying it and adjusting the general reevaluation report to meet the spirit of the guidance. And that's largely what we did last summer. And we were able to engage with our division and headquarters offices last July to show them how we had interpreted this guidance and applied it to the general reevaluation report. And we got positive feedback that we were on the right track. With that, I'll go ahead and talk about planning modernization and what it consists of. and how it affects our studies. So fundamentally, the Corps of Engineers is trying to be responsive to a long-standing complaint and concern on the part of non-federal sponsors, USACE-wide, nationwide, that our study process is taking too long and costing too much. Taking too long is challenging for sponsors that are trying to quickly, relatively quickly, address real flood risk to their communities. And the cost, these studies are cost shared between federal and non-federal government, and so the cost is of a concern as well. And the non-federal sponsors across the Corps have voiced their concerns repeatedly for many years to Congress, and Congress is taking a look at the program as well. So the Corps has gone about re-evaluating our planning program to see what we might do differently so that we can be more responsive to the needs of the nation. And that really means tightening up our focus and looking at what we consider to be the most viable flood risk management area studies that are underway for the highest risk areas nationwide. One of the challenges associated with the Corps' program has been there are so many investigations in the national study portfolio, it had been on the order of magnitude of over 600 investigations nationwide. Not all of those are getting funded at levels that allow for meaningful progress from year to year to year. And the longer things take, the more they're going to cost, and that's just very much what we were finding to be the case. So we spent a lot of time in 2012 looking at the national portfolio and evaluating it against some criteria to see if some studies nationwide needed to be rescoped or even terminated. And some of the criteria were, has it been actively receiving federal dollars? Has the study actively been receiving non-federal dollars? And if the answer to either of those questions is no, chances are that study was going to be deferred or reclassified as inactive. That happened to a number of investigations across the Corps. We also asked a question, does it look like the study is identifying something that warrants federal participation? And the answer to that question in a number of cases nationwide was also no. So far we've thinned a program that was over 600 investigations down to in the order of 250 of remaining active studies USACE-wide. We are fine with our West Sacramento General Reevaluation Report. We've been able to survive those types of criteria and questions, and so it is considered to be a high priority remaining active investigation to date. So these imperatives for change caused the Corps to look at the program, the planning program, and come up with some guidance that helps us do a few things more quickly and we think more effectively. It's really about taking a look immediately, and we did that in 2012, shortly after the guidance came out, at the ongoing investigations to look to see if the information we had so far showed us that there's likely federal interest in participating in a solution, in a project. So planning modernization in large part is about getting to that understanding or realization much sooner in the life of a typical study. Because the portfolio of investigations nationwide has shrunk, resources should be available to focus on those studies that remain active, and that should be a good thing for being able to complete the remaining active studies. We did find in 2012 that our headquarters reviewers, they conduct policy reviews on any of our investigations, that their plates were very, very full because all of that large portfolio of investigations was getting scrutinized, and they were all very involved in that. So we did experience some delays in getting some of their attention, but that didn't slow us down. That just meant they were a little slower to keep up with some of the progress we were able to make last year. The planning program still allows for acknowledgement that local sponsors might have a plan that is different from the one that the federal government identifies as being in the federal interest that you'd actually want to implement. We still can make allowances for something that we call a locally preferred plan if you choose to implement something like that, if there is a difference between what the federal government would otherwise recommend. And we really have this reoccurring theme, and my next couple of slides touch on it. The idea and really how we feel we can go about doing things more quickly is to dial down in the feasibility study phase our level of analysis that we're using to base our decision making on. That doesn't mean that we have a reduction in the level of engineering, economic, environmental work that goes into actually designing and constructing a project. But when it comes down to picking a plan relative to other plans and making that investment decision, we're looking at doing that based on less information without reducing the quality of the information. It really comes down to identifying critical information that's necessary to understand what the alternative plans we look at cost and accomplish, and not getting caught up in the weeds and chasing down additional nice-to-have information. We think there's tremendous cost savings to have there in that arena, but we also need, in doing that, to identify any risk or uncertainty associated with not having some degree of additional information. But we believe in identifying that, we still can have a quality recommendation. And again, this vertical integration, the idea of the district office in Sacramento engaging and getting the attention of our division and headquarters offices much more frequently, more regularly throughout the process, will help keep an understanding of our studies fresh in their minds, and that helps with moving things forward more quickly. We believe we can get some direct feedback in a much more quick and constructive fashion than we otherwise might. Typically, we don't usually engage headquarters until we're very near the end of a project development process, the feasibility study process. So this is better from that standpoint. The nickname 3x3x3 came to us because we have some basic premises associated with this planning modernization initiative. We've been challenged, well, we've been told in part and challenged in part that our studies from here on out should not cost more than $3 million. That is total project costs, so that feasibility studies are typically cost shared, 50% federal, 50% non-federal. So I do mean total project cost. They should be completed within 3 years from start to finish. The third 3 was originally intended to mean that increased coordination between the district, our division headquarters, and our national headquarters. Our Deputy Commanding General, when describing the third 3, said that it meant a report needed to fit into a 3-inch binder. So we have 4 definitions to 3x3x3 now, which we're living with. And I was hoping it was 3 pages long. I wish. Thank you. So what's different? Again, this kind of comes back to that reoccurring theme of planning modernization, which is to really understand in our scoping what is the critical must-have information, what is the information that we don't believe is germane to making a decision and understanding the differences between alternative plans. Our vertical engagement will be decision-focused. We engage headquarters much more regularly, and when we do that, we're making decisions. We're teeing up decisions for them to make so that we don't go back and rethink our prior decisions or our conclusions from earlier engagement with them. We're trying to really memorialize and keep traction and momentum in getting through our process more quickly. And they always encourage us to develop our report earlier in the process as opposed to later in the process. Our planning modernization process actually now memorializes some required earlier products, which I think is a good thing. It causes us to write sooner and get review of what we're writing sooner so that we know we're developing a report that's going to hit the mark. What's not different is, again, we are still relying on sound engineering, environmental and economic information, real estate information, and our environmental analysis. We are still complying with all the laws and regulations which we would normally comply with. This doesn't change any of that. It's really in the level of detail and the assumptions we make, being able to satisfy those requirements. And we still engage with the public, not because just we're required to, but we know that developing a project that's implementable includes a public participation program. In this case, we've been dovetailing with your EIP public program. So our bottom line is we do believe generally that our studies will be completed in a quicker amount of time at less cost. We've already rescoped the remaining active studies, and there's considerable savings in our study costs that we believe we've attained nationwide for the whole study program. I'll show you the reduction in study costs that we've estimated for the general reevaluation report here for West Sacramento. We're still looking at developing a quality decision document that, in my words, is approvable. That's my bottom line when we're developing a decision document, is it's got to be something that's approvable. Again, we're looking at managing, having risk-informed decision-making, where we're identifying what our decisions are based on, what uncertainty is included in the information that those decisions and recommendations are based on, and what that means so that we can have all the partners involved can make risk-informed decisions. And in the end, we believe that the Corps' nationwide study program will be a strong, viable program that Congress will be confident in funding. Oops. Thank you. This is a graphic that shows our study milestone durations and flow. Across the top, we have added the West Sacramento GRR milestone dates to show how it aligns with our new process. So that milestone 1, that alternatives milestone, is what we met last March 2012. And we are now moving towards identification of what we call the tentatively selected plan. This is the plan that the Corps, the state, and the city and WSAFCA would agree to recommend to Congress for authorization to be implemented. So that's a really critical milestone scheduled to occur this summer in August. This will be the topic of discussion over the next few months as we figure out which project it is that we're going to recommend together. And I have a little bit of information to show you on the alternatives that are being considered in the general reevaluation report in just a moment. The remaining milestones are sort of procedural ones. The number 2, identification of that tentatively selected plan, is a big one. Once we identify that, it really becomes getting the reviews accomplished that help us turn a draft recommendation into a final recommendation. So after that milestone 2, we have a public and agency review of our draft EIS-EIR and the draft general reevaluation report. We get feedback from agencies and the public. We see what may or may not need to be modified in terms of the project that we're looking at recommending, and then we go through finalizing our documents and developing what we call a report of the Chief of Engineers. That is the document ultimately that the administration sends to Congress to use as a basis for authorization in a Water Resources Development Act. So the alternatives under consideration in the general reevaluation report, in addition to the no action plan, we are looking at an alternative that focuses on making levee repairs to deal with seepage and stability issues. It would also include raising levees along the Sacramento River. We have an alternative that would look at doing the seepage and stability repairs, not raising levees along the Sacramento River, but instead widening the Sacramento bypass by about 1,500 feet, essentially doubling it. That would pull water out of the American Sacramento system, put a bit more into the Yolo bypass system, thereby eliminating the need to do levee raises south of the confluence with the American River and the Sacramento River. We also looked at something we call the I Street diversion structure, which would include, and actually a primary feature would be construction of a gate in the Sacramento River at about I Street, which would divert flows, a considerably greater volume of flows into the Sacramento bypass and Yolo bypass system. That could effectively eliminate the need to do any levee work at all on the Sacramento River south of the confluence. This idea has been looked at pretty closely through, I think, a 4-day rigorous partnership set of workshops, because it is a very new idea. It's not something that we've looked at in the area. And because it's such a new idea, we don't have a lot of information on it, how it could be designed, how it could be constructed, how it would be operated, how it would function, would it work reliably. And so we got a better handle on that our take now is that the hydraulic impacts associated with redirecting that degree of, that volume of flow into the Yolo bypass system would be very, very difficult to implement until we really understood what the impacts were and what we would do as part of offsetting those impacts into Yolo County. So right now, if I had to look into my crystal ball and forecast what plan I think we will likely be recommending to Congress, I would say it's more likely to be the first alternative, which is the levee repairs, including the raises on the Sacramento River, with a caveat that the widening the Sacramento bypass is actually looking pretty good when we are also looking at doing a general reevaluation report on the other side of the river with the state and SAFCA. It could be that that kind of a regional solution could be advantageous for both sides of the river working together. That would mean widening the bypass would be a shared cost between both flood control agencies as well as the state. And I think it would be the amount each sponsor would pay would be determined based on the degree of benefit they received. So we're having discussions with SAFCA, the state, to see what makes most sense regionally and locally on both sides of the river to recommend to Congress. My sense is that the I Street diversion structure, while it might be an interesting idea, would take many, many years to decades to really flush out to a level where it could be implemented. So I would envision that that idea could get kicked into some of the regional or basin-wide planning efforts that the partners are all working on. All three of these alternatives would include something that's looking promising in our investigation, and that is a closure structure being constructed along the Deepwater Ship Channel. And I have two maps that show what that could look like and what that could accomplish. This is a picture of the area of study under the General Reevaluation Report for West Sacramento. The red lines indicate levee work of some sort that we would anticipate being a part of that first alternative. And this is a comparison map that shows construction of a closure structure across the Deepwater Ship Channel, where the box indicates could eliminate the need to do levee work along the North Port Levee, South Port Levee, as well as some of the expanse of the Deepwater Ship Channel levees as well. So it's looking like it's something that's worth pursuing as part of any alternative that we pursue. This is a look at our schedules. At our schedule to complete the general reevaluation report, we have an in-progress review, so one of those vertical milestone check-ins with our division and headquarters in early February on the 7th and 8th. We have our tentatively selected plan milestone this summer in August, where we declare as partners the plan that we intend to recommend to Congress. After that public and agency review process is complete, we have that agency decision milestone end of the calendar year in December, and then we're working on finalizing our recommendation. Most of 2014 would be spent detailing out the recommended plan, taking it to a higher level of design so that we can get a really good cost estimate that would be the basis for congressional authorization. It's important that we have integrity in the project cost estimate that Congress uses when they authorize the project so that it endures. And then that chief's report would be completed in December 2014. This is consistent with the state of California requirements for urbanized areas to demonstrate that they have a plan or a plan that's been laid out and has approvals to meet state legislation requirements. This is a look at our study cost. Prior to planning modernization, our estimate for the study was $10.1 million. It included a lot of design work to be able to understand these different alternatives to a deeper degree. We have reduced that estimate to $6.85 million. $3.85 million had already been expended prior to planning modernization. So we did some rescoping last year and were able to tighten up that estimate. Because we were an ongoing study, we're not held to the requirement that we cost no more than $3 million. Any ongoing studies just needed to go through a meaningful rescoping exercise and show what we felt we needed to be able to bring an ongoing study to completion with the spirit of planning modernization, and we were able to do that. And you have been providing what we call in-kind services, which is work as opposed to cash, towards accomplishment of the general reevaluation report. Your EIP work lends itself to that, and you're able to get credit for some of that as part of your non-federal cost share contribution. So we have a few different credit situations that are in play at the moment. One is we have one, you have one EIP that has been approved by the Secretary of the Army for Civil Works for consideration of credit under the Section 104 Credit Authority. So your I Street Bridge work was is considered creditable under that 104 authority. The general reevaluation report will make a determination as to how much of your 104 of your I Street EIP project work is considered creditable under the 104 authority. Your Southport EIP, we are working closely with you on to make sure that we get a credit agreement in place prior to you beginning to construct that project. The trigger for the Corps of Engineers for consideration of credit under the credit authority that remains, and that is the 221 Credit Authority, is release of a draft report for public and agency review. At that point in time, a memorandum of understanding could be entered into between the partners, and then you'd proceed with implementing your EIP for Southport. We do not currently have a credit authority that is covering your CHP EIP site nor your Rivers EIP site, and I know that's remains an issue of concern, and I understand that you're continuing to work that issue. My office will continue to advise in any way we can. That's really something that's outside of the purview of our district or division offices or even our headquarters office. That's a policy that's established by the Secretary of the Army for Civil Works. And we do know that there's a lot of interest in additional revisions to our credit authorities. We deal with the credit authorities that we have in hand, and we'll just remain flexible if there are any adjustments as we go so that we can adjust as well. With that, I just want to say that I think the planning modernization process has been a positive thing for the general reevaluation report. That in addition to making sure that we have a schedule that aligns very well with state requirements, as well as with your EIP schedule. And right now everything's lined up with us completing our chief's report in December of 2014 and our draft report later this year. The schedules are tracking well right now. So it really just remains a matter of me making sure that I and my leadership colleagues in the Sacramento office keep our prioritization on the investigation, keeping it moving forward, and that we do everything we can to enable our headquarters reviewers to review things in a timely fashion. And with that, I can go ahead and take any questions.
Are there questions? Mr. Christoph, did you want to?
I do have a couple of
Representative on West
questions.
Africa, some comments?
First of all, thank you. You do an outstanding job, you and your team, so thank you very much. When you talked about the slip repairs that the Corps was responsible for a few years ago, are those repairs certified?
I'm going to ask Tom Carvinen, our project manager, to address that. Tom is project manager on those repairs as well.
Tom, could if you wouldn't mind coming up to the microphone, because we have an audience of tens at home that want to be able to hear the answer.
Hello, my name is Tom Carvinen. I'm project manager for both the West Sacramento GR and the Sac Bank project. Those are not certified at this point. That's something that, it's my understanding, the Central Valley Flood Protection Board does after our recommendation in turning over, and that hasn't been accomplished yet. So,
okay.
But we've completed and we've given the notice of project completion, and so.
But is there still a certification process for the Corps? Because the Corps used to, years and years ago, certify a levee after it was completed and this and that. And so is it...
the FEMA, I think you're thinking of FEMA. So at least that's...
Oh, okay. Maybe. All right.
So.
And that's the only question I have on that part. I guess the other question I have really is for Alicia, and that's the 104 permit versus the 221. After your presentation at West Sac-SAFCA last week, I had some other jurisdictions that heard the discussion, and they wanted to know, what is the advantage of doing things like West Sacramento has done, and they are starting to do, as far as finding the matching funds, in essence. In other words, the sales tax, we passed a sales tax measure. We did a development fee, and we did tax assessments so that people assess themselves all over again. Because we're very aggressive. You know, we know we've got this river right next to us, but other communities are asking, should they be doing those things if these kinds of 104, the 104 goes away, and the 221, they're really not sure they're going to get any funding out of that. And so they're asking me, and I really didn't know how to respond to that. I said, the only thing I can tell you is what we did. And because we are very aggressive, and we pass those things. And quite frankly, when we go back, when we go to the state, or when we go back to Washington, D.C., the people back there are very aware of how aggressive we were and what we have done. And they understand what we've done. So that's what I have told the folks that I have talked to after the presentation. I guess it's a 221 permit that it's just got everybody sort of stymied. It seems like it's something that takes a while, and maybe it's just not ready. I don't know. But I don't know what the issue is.
I think for communities to decide whether or not they want to pursue implementation of projects in advance of a federal project really comes down to understanding their own capability and their own priorities. And it's probably a different answer for different communities depending on what they're able to do. The consistent aspect between our various credit authorities, the old 104 credit authority, the current 221 credit authority, is that credit it's risky. It is a low budgetary priority year to year. That's fairly consistent. And so there are risks associated with it. 104 provided an opportunity for a non-federal partner to undertake construction of a project or a portion of a project much earlier in our process. The 221 now requires that work not begin, if they want to consider it eligible for credit, until release of a draft document. That's considerably far into a feasibility study life, although planning modernization does help make sure that that's about 2 years as opposed to many more years later than that. There's no assurance that policies won't change. That could work to sponsors' advantage, that could work to their disadvantage. And it's really just making sure you understand what you're dealing with and what the risks are associated with it. That's where my office can help in trying to understand those things, forecast those things.
Well, can your office articulate the frustration is probably too strong of a word, but at the same time, you know, can your office articulate those kinds of feelings at to the national level, so that they really have the understanding that this really isn't just a delay tactic from a financing perspective, but is there something that we can do to help you continue down the path so that we can be aggressive? And because it seems like for a community our size, to spend 20 years or 25 years getting through this whole process is, you know, it seems like it's a long time for protection of those citizens.
I would say you're doing probably the most powerful thing you can do, which is you've allied yourselves with communities across the nation that have similar situations, and I really think that's probably how change will come about. We do relay the challenges that we face up our chain of command to make sure that they understand what we call, and I think they agree with, are the unintended consequences of the change in policy. Meanwhile, my office continues to do what we can do, which is deal with the playing field as it is, and we'll continue to do that and deliver the GRR on the schedule that we have and work with you on your EIP.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would just, Director Stockton, the Director of Civil Works for the Corps, who's been to the city twice, I think, in recent years, was at our mayor's meeting as well. And I mean, without giving anyone up, I mean, it's very clear that the leadership of the Corps has conveyed these issues to the Assistant Secretary, who is an appointee of the President, and so I think that that message has been transmitted around some of the consequences and also just some of the wrong incentives that it creates, because it wasn't as though under the prior regime you just automatically got credit. I mean, as Ms. Kirchner said, the appropriation for that was risky, but it was also, I mean, you had, if what you did wasn't actually then what was recommended in the GRR, you didn't get credit. So you're taking lots of risks, but you're doing that on balance because you want to improve or lessen the flood risk that your citizens are facing and that your businesses and others are facing. That's a choice that local communities could make. It was a good thing for the federal government on the whole, because if communities like ours were improving safety for people and property without the federal government having to spend a dime other than what it was already doing in terms of a preparation of a GRR, it's all to the good to the federal government. And so I think there is pretty broad agreement, and certainly the message I've gotten, from body language and other comments from the Corps at every level has been that they understand, and that certainly our experience with the district has been that as well. I think in part the response of the district to try to how can we help to deal with these challenges by making sure we get to the feasibility study report at a point in time in this particular case now where at least we can't as you say can't fix the issue at the district level around the CHP Academy site or the river site, but how do we get all the timing of this right aligned so that the Southport project can proceed? That's really the critical question that we and the district can do our best to try to solve within the constraints of 221. The prior projects, we're going to have to get a solution from the Congress or from the Assistant Secretary, but I think the district understands as well as we do the need and the tools that we do have at our disposal to get the Southport project aligned with to get the feasibility study report delivered in time to be useful for the Southport project levy. So I mean, I should say the mayor's water council meeting where Director Stockton was, going around the room, every single mayor in the room feels like they have to talk, and they all, every one of them is, can you help us? We're struggling with our Corps office locally about this issue, or we're not getting any responsiveness from the Corps about this, and it was I was a little bit of a fish out of the water, because I was thinking, we've had a tremendous relationship with the folks at the district level at every level, so we need you, Director Stockton, to support them. They don't need a fire lit under them, but we need to get this work done together. So I think that message is getting conveyed certainly by the team here in Sacramento. Mr. Johannesson?
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. I know we've heard this before, but I think it was very well put together and got everything laid out. And the planning modernization, it looks like it's off to a good start. I don't know when you're going to have statistics on, how it's working out, but we've always enjoyed our relationship with the Corps and the responsiveness. So we are probably one of the outlying cities that has had good response. One question on the I Street diversion. Is there any discussion about decertification of the Sacramento River as a navigable waterway to do that, or would that involve some type of decertification?
We have not looked at any sort of decertification of the navigation project. We're looking at the navigation channel in terms of the role it plays in flood risk in terms of potential levee failure, potential flooding from the ship channel, backwater effects, things like that, and potential solutions to the flooding problem. We have not, we wouldn't have a reason necessarily from the standpoint of the general reevaluation report to look at something like that.
I was just curious if there's a diversion to me along the I Street Bridge looks like something that would stop shipping. Is it that type of diversion?
No, it's something that would be, it would be some sort of a gated structure that would only be put into operation to manage very high flood flow.
Like a weir type of thing.
Yeah, I have a hard time envisioning exactly. And there's a few different options of what it could look like. We've been consulting across the Corps for other geographic locations that have done things like that to see what the different options are. So it looks like there's a structure, some version of a structure that could be put into place, but it would only be operated to manage high volume flood flow.
Thank you.
One more question.
Sure.
You know, just one more, really sort of a comment. If you are looking at two alternatives, and one of them is levees are raised and widened and this and that, and the other one is pertains to the bypass, one of the issues that I would like the Corps to look at, and that would be there's a notch in our bypass where the water comes through the various places, and as it's going out to the delta, there's a large notch. It's an eddy, and it causes a big eddy when high flows are going through. And it seems like from a hydrology perspective, if we were to cut that off and put another levee in so that that notch doesn't exist, just becomes, bare ground. That's something I'd like to have the Corps look at and maybe you already have, I don't know, but if there is something that is going to happen to the bypass.
Okay. I'm not certain if we've looked at that in particular. I'm going to look over.
Okay. But I mean, it's just, okay, great. Super. Yeah. Yeah.
So that is something that we've looked at and we'll be able to report out on as we go forward and describe our alternative plans.
It's just something to add to the list.
As long as it doesn't add it another month.
Yeah, no
more time, no more
more time. No more time.
Yes, what is it? Oh, we're only going to investigate what we have to, and
Yes.
Mr. Villegas, any?
Dialed down. No, it's all been said. Thank you very much. It's a very helpful presentation, and thank you for being here. I know the collaborative effort that's existed for the I Street work, for the CHP, for the Rivers Project, they were crucial for us, and to get those going and get those results as quickly as we did was a huge step for us, so thank you.
My pleasure, and I do want to acknowledge your team has been really fantastic to work with. It is a collaborative process, and we definitely benefit from that on our end with the Corps.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for being here. Thanks for the entire presentation. Actually, it's an extraordinarily important project for the community and for the region, for obvious reasons in terms of the protection of life and property. But it's also incredibly complicated. All of these section, the 104, the 108, the 221. That's just the three that you've mentioned tonight. There's a million of that. 500 different funding sources. All these timeframes. All these studies. While we're also building projects and improving projects, and it's very difficult for members of the public to understand, and it's even a challenge sometimes for us to keep it all together. So this was a very helpful presentation. Of course, the takeaway for folks in the community is that we and DWR and the Corps are working hard to reduce flood risk. You don't call it flood protection anymore for the plain reason that there's no such thing as protection from floods. That you're only managing the level of risk, and so every time we do this conversation, it's just for the tens of people that are watching, which is a reminder that flood insurance and appropriate preparations for the potential flooding is a critical part of our strategy as well. That this is the engineers and the city and the Corps are not solving this entirely. We're doing our part, but everyone in the community has a role to play for their own protection and reduction of risk. But we really, really do appreciate your team's work and your willingness to be part of the council meeting and to share the update on the process with the whole community. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. That then concludes our consideration of item 11. Council calendar, Ms. Richardson?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is our last meeting of the month, and the annual council planning retreat will take place next week. On the February calendar, the February 6th Port Commission meeting is not going to be happening, and that will be there will be a special meeting on February 20th for the port instead of the February 6th meeting.
Okay.
And that's all. Thank you.
Questions on the calendar? City manager report?
Mayor, council members, the mayor did go over the trip we took to Washington, D.C. last week. There's a summary in your packets. I just wanted to thank Mike Lucan. Did a great job in the preparation of that. And our team back in Washington, Holland Knight, did a wonderful job. I think we're really in good position to have them there. And timing this with the mayor's conference to have Mayor Cabaldon there was very, very helpful. Also, in regard to Washington, D.C., we put the cap-to-cap registration form there. If you're interested, please let me know or the clerk know. I just want to make a note that there's an early discount. If you let us know by February 15th, we could do some savings. Thank you.
This first time a West Sacramentan is leading the whole event, not honorary, but for real.
The chair.
Yeah, Vav Sandina, planning commissioner, as the chair of the whole trip. So great. All right. Any questions on city manager reports? City attorney reports? There's none. Staff direction from members of the council. We have no future agenda item requests. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Johannesson and seconded by Mr. Christoph. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.